Beneath Auricant stood a prison older than the city above it. Its corridors had not been carved. They had been melted through layers of pale stone by something the old wardens called the subterranean sun. No flame remained there, yet the walls were warm to the touch. And those who slept against them dreamed of being swallowed by a mouth without teeth. Thessa Veyr spent 3 years in the lowest chamber. She had once stood upon the western towers, wearing the white cloak of the crown's far guard. From those heights, she had been able to strike a gull from the storm or sever a ship's rope beyond the harbor wall. Then came the bread riots. The starving gathered beneath the granaries, while the city's rulers watched from balconies plated in gold. Thessa and 12 other marksmen were commanded to fire into the crowd. 11 obeyed. Thessa lowered her bow. For that refusal, her name was scraped from the barracks stones. Her family's home was sealed. Her younger brother was taken for questioning and never returned. In the prison below the city, she learned to count time by the screams passing through the pipes. On the final night of her 3rd year, a tremor opened a crack in the rear wall of her cell. Behind it waited a narrow crypt containing no bones, no coffin, and no dust. There was only an amulet. A pearl, blacker than the surrounding darkness, hung within 8 silver crescents. Though untouched by light, its surface reflected Thessa's face. But the reflection was not imprisoned. It stood in a field beneath a red sky, surrounded by kneeling figures whose mouths had been sewn shut. When Thessa reached for the pearl, the crescents closed around her fingers. Something whispered from inside it. Not a word, a direction. She pulled the relic from the wall. Far above, 7 prison lamps extinguished one after another. The 8th remained burning inside her chest. Thessa escaped during the tremor. She strangled one guard with his own chain and stole a short bow from another. By the time the alarm bells sounded, she had reached the upper galleries where the prisoners were displayed to visiting magistrates. 6 wardens blocked the final passage. Thessa carried only 1 arrow. She released it at the nearest man. The shaft entered beneath his collarbone. Before his body touched the floor, the arrow tore itself free and turned in the air. It struck a 2nd warden, then a 3rd. With every impact, its wooden shaft grew darker. Frost gathered along its feathers. The sound it made was no longer the whistle of an arrow, but the drawn-out breath of someone dying in another room. By the 4th victim, the arrow had become a line of black radiance. By the 5th, Thessa felt blood leave her heart. By the 6th, she fell to one knee. The final warden tried to flee. The arrow curved around a pillar and entered the back of his skull with enough force to break the stone beyond him. Silence followed. Then warmth returned to Thessa's veins. Not all the warmth she had lost. Only a thin measure drawn from the darkness spreading through the dead men. The amulet pulsed against her throat. One of its silver crescents had turned red. Thessa should have torn it from her neck. Instead, she looked at the open gate. Above her waited the city that had taken her name, her freedom, and her brother. She stepped over the bodies. Behind her, the 1st warden's fingers began to twitch. His corpse pointed toward the 2nd. The 2nd pointed toward the 3rd. One after another, the dead indicated the path the arrow had taken. A sequence written in flesh. Beyond the prison walls, Auricant had grown sick. Golden banners covered the upper districts, while black mildew consumed the houses below. Grain ships arrived each morning, yet the poor still boiled leather and ground cemetery flowers into flour. The city's rulers had begun calling hunger a form of civic discipline. Thessa joined the rebels beneath the abandoned dye markets. Their leader was a physician named Auricant, who stitched a red thread through the sleeve of every new member. The thread symbolized the bloodline of no family and the banner of no kingdom. It meant only that suffering should never be endured alone. Orin remembered Thessa immediately. He also remembered her brother.
He survived the questioning.
He told her.
For a while.
Thessa did not ask what had happened afterward. She began striking the crown's grain convoys. From rooftops and bell towers, she sent arrows through armored captains. The Eighth Hunger carried them onward into drivers, overseers, and tax collectors. Each body became a turning point. Each turning point made the next impact more violent. The rebels started calling her the Black Interval. Where she appeared, rows of soldiers fell before the first man understood he had been struck. Yet every battle left Thessa weaker. Her gums bled, her hands shook. Dark veins formed beneath her eyes. She would collapse among the liberated grain sacks, while the amulet slowly returned stolen warmth to her body. Auricant begged her to stop wearing it.
It does not heal you,
he said.
It is teaching your body how little life it requires.
Thessa answered that revolutions were not won by those who preserve themselves. Still, she began hearing voices inside the pearl. At first they were shapeless murmurs. Then she recognized the wardens from the prison. Later came soldiers from the convoys. They did not accuse her. They repeated the same phrase.
There is always another.
By winter, 3 of the 8 silver crescents had turned red. The rebellion controlled half the lower city. And every night, Thessa dreamed of an arrow circling the world, searching for a body that had not yet been wounded. The crown answered the rebellion by removing the tongues from Auricant's temple bells. No public mourning was permitted. No alarm could be raised without royal consent. No sound was allowed to gather the citizens into one body. The rebels forged clappers from confiscated weapons and restored the bells themselves. The night they rang, the city rose. What followed became known as the War of Hollow Bells. Thessa fought from the roofs, while the lower districts surged toward the palace bridges. Every arrow she released passed from soldier to soldier, gathering speed and shadow. A shaft striking one man as iron emerged from the fourth as smoke. A bolt released as flame became darkness by its 6th victim. The Ace Hunger did not merely increase force. It translated whatever Thessa gave it into something older than fire, steel, or poison. It turned intention into absence. But the Relic's price grew with its power. For every enemy touched, Thessa felt an invisible wound open somewhere inside her. She tasted blood before the arrow landed. She felt ribs crack that no weapon had struck. Her heart skipped beats in time with distant deaths. Then the darkness returned, a portion of what it had taken. The sensation became intoxicating. Pain, emptiness, then the cold sweetness of stolen vitality flowing home. Thessa began releasing arrows not because a target needed to die, but because the silence afterward had become unbearable. During the assault on the Eastern Bridge, one arrow passed through 13 soldiers. When it returned to the air after the final impact, it did not fall, it hovered. Its head slowly turned toward another group of men. Thessa had not commanded it. She lowered her bow. The arrow moved anyway. By dawn, 5 silver crescents had become red. The palace bridge belonged to the rebels. Thessa stood among hundreds of bodies, listening to the restored bells. Between each toll, she heard a second sound, a wet clicking beneath her throat. The amulet was counting. Auricant examined the relic beneath the old anatomy theater. He placed it inside a circle of salt, glass needles, and bowls filled with Thessa's blood. Whenever he moved the amulet away from her, her pulse weakened. Whenever he brought it closer, the blood in the bowls trembled. After 3 nights, he discovered that the black pearl was not a stone. It was an eye turned inward. Its surface contained layers of living memory. Every person touched by one of Thessa's attacks had left something behind. A final image, a last fear, an unfinished hatred. The relic preserved those fragments and threaded them together.
It is building a mind,
Auricant said. Thessa heard the voices clearly now. Hundreds whispered beneath her own thoughts. Some called for mothers. Some cursed the crown. Some cursed the rebels. Some begged Thessa to finish what she had begun. Others spoke names she did not know. Names of relatives. Names of children. Names of people who would one day seek revenge. Auricant found an inscription hidden beneath the innermost crescent. 7 feed the road. The 8th becomes the road. The 7 outward crescents represented the relic's gathered victims. The inward crescent represented its bearer. Once the first 7 were filled, the wearer would cease to command a sequence. They would become part of it. Thessa tried to remove the amulet. The crescents tightened around her throat. Every wound she had caused opened inside her at once. She saw through the eyes of dying wardens. She felt the terror of soldiers watching an arrow turn toward them. She heard the skulls crack, the armor split, the breath stop. Yet beneath all those deaths was another memory. Her brother knelt in a white chamber before the royal interrogator. He was still alive. The memory had been taken from a soldier struck during the bridge battle. Thessa saw where her brother was being held, the Hall of Merciful Correction. At the center of the palace, the 7th crescent began to redden. Thessa took up her bow. Auricant blocked the doorway.
The relic gave you that memory because it knows what you will do.
No.
Thessa said.
It gave me a target.
Inside the pearl, the choir whispered.
There is always another.
The rebels breached the palace during a storm of silver rain. Zaya moved ahead of them through galleries lined with portraits of rulers who had never walked the starving districts. She killed guards without pausing, each arrow continuing deeper into the palace. By the time she reached the Hall of Merciful Correction, the 7th crescent was entirely red. Her brother hung inside a glass chamber. He was alive, but only in the narrowest meaning of the word. His eyes had been removed. Golden wire ran through his arms and chest. Each breath caused tiny bells within his ribs to ring. Beside the chamber stood Chancellor Vorst, architect of the famine decrees. He held no weapon.
You have already killed everyone between yourself and justice,
he told her.
What will justice become when there is no one left between it and you?
Thessa raised her bow. Voss stepped in front of the glass chamber. She released the arrow. It entered his heart. The 8th hunger tore it free and sought another body. Thessa saw its path too late. The arrow passed through the glass. It struck her brother. The black force gathered inside. It erupted through the golden wires, reducing his body to a silhouette of ash. Then the arrow turned again. There were no soldiers left in the chamber. No visible enemies. It flew into the corridor and found Auricant called. The physician had followed her to prevent exactly this. The arrow pierced his throat. Thessa screamed for the sequence to end. It continued through 2 rebels behind him, then through a palace servant, then through a child hiding beneath a ceremonial table. Each impact became darker. Each death opened another invisible wound inside Thessa. The final crescent turned red. The 8th pointed inward. For the first time, the black pearl opened. Inside it, Thessa saw no reflection. She saw a road made from every life she had touched. The road stretched beyond the palace, beyond Auricant, beyond the horizon. Countless figures stood along it, each holding a red thread. At the road's end waited another version of Thessa. That other Thessa drew a bow and aimed back at her. After the palace fell, the people declared Thessa their liberator. She heard the proclamation from beneath the city. Unable to control the relic, she returned to the ancient prison where she had first found it. The surviving rebels sealed the passages behind her, believing she had gone below to die. But death no longer approached her easily. Whenever her heart weakened, the 8th hunger drew vitality from the memories trapped inside it. It fed her the last warmth of dead soldiers, wardens, servants, and friends. She remained alive through the people she had killed. In the deepest chamber, Thessa found murals hidden beneath centuries of melted stone. They depicted an extinct order known as the cartographers of grief. They believed hatred was not an emotion, but a direction. Every injury pointed toward another injury. Every act of vengeance created a path that someone else would eventually follow. The cartographers created the Black Pearl to map those paths. But the Relic had discovered that violence changed as it traveled. A blow returned stronger when carried through fear, memory, and loss. The Pearl began cultivating conflict so it could study the transformations. Kingdoms had fallen while wearing it. Families had destroyed one another across generations. Religions had formed around wounds no living believer remembered receiving. The amulet did not hunger for blood. It hungered for continuation. Thessa carried it to the chamber of the subterranean sun, where pale fire still slept beneath the stone. She intended to burn herself and the relic together. Before she entered the flame, the voices inside the pearl became Orin's voice, then her brother's, then her own. They sang a melody of 8 descending notes. With each note, Thessa remembered someone she hated. With each memory, a figure appeared in the chamber, not a ghost, a possible victim. The relic no longer required nearby bodies. It had learned to travel through remembrance. Thessa understood that destroying her body would not end it. As long as someone remembered her war, someone could inherit its direction. Above her, Auricant's hollow bells began ringing. No hands pulled their ropes. The entire city heard the 8-note melody, and in every house old anger awakened. Thessa climbed from the prison before dawn. Auricant was tearing itself apart. Former rebels accused one another of betrayal. Families of dead soldiers hunted those who had supported the uprising. Starving citizens raided the homes of newly appointed ministers. Every act of revenge produced another grievance. Red threads hung from doorways like veins torn from the city. Thessa walked to the highest bell tower. The people saw her and fell silent. Some called her savior. Some called her murderer. Both names fed the pearl. She tied one end of a red thread to the amulet and the other to her final arrow. Then she placed the arrow against her own heart. If hatred required a direction, she would turn it inward. If the bearer was the 8th road, she would make that road end inside herself. Thessa released the string. The arrow passed through her heart. For one perfect moment, every silver crescent returned to its original color. The voices stopped. The bells fell silent. Thessa smiled as she collapsed. Then the arrow emerged from her back. It carried no blood. It had become a thin line of sound. The note struck the great bell above her. From that bell, it leapt to the next tower, then to the harbor bells, then to the bells of distant villages. Each resonance grew deeper and darker. Sailors heard it beneath the waves. Shepherds heard it inside the bones of mountains. Children woke singing melodies their parents had never taught them. The 8th hunger slipped from Thessa's throat and rolled between the tower stones. When the citizens found her body, the relic was gone. Years later, songs about the Black Interval spread beyond Auricant. Every singer changed the story. Every kingdom added its own enemies. Every grieving family placed a different name inside the final verse. Yet all versions contained the same 8 descending notes. Those who heard the 7th dreamed of a black pearl. Those who heard the 8th woke with a red mark around their throats. Some claimed that weapons flew more eagerly after the song was sung. Others insisted that an accusation spoken during the final note never stopped with the person it condemned. It passed from mouth to mouth, gathering cruelty with every repetition. In forgotten rooms, people still whisper Thessa's final belief.
I will become the last wound.
But the song always answers.
There is no last wound. There is only the next voice.